Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Val Almeida. The Honorable Mayor Frederick M. Kalish, Jr. His Excellency, the Honorable Jose Brito and his wife, Mrs. Brito. State Representative from Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the first Republican Cape Verdean representative ever, Mr. Vinny D. Macedo. Vinny, would you take the stage? Councilor from Ward 4, Honorable Joseph Jojo Forts. And we will have featured speakers and guests. Those featured speakers and guests includes a dear good friend, poet laureate and professor of UMass Dartmouth, Mr. Everett Hoagland. A person who will be bringing you reflections and a message, Mr. Wayne Ibn Musa Barbosa. We will now have the posting of the guards.
Forward, march.
We will now have the national anthem program where a dear friend of mine, a great friend of the late, great Manny Coster, and a friend of yours for many years, professor at UMass Dartmouth, someone that I, along with Wayne Musa Barbosa, Ross Grace, and a few others, who journeyed to the Million Man March and came back with a commitment. This is part of that commitment. As you notice, Bridging History with Community, the theme of all of this is history. We now bring you Professor Everett Hoagland to recite a poem called Parting Ways.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, Mayor Kalish, distinguished and honorable state and local representatives, ladies and gentlemen. You know, back in 1776, many people of African heritage in New England went over to the British side because the British were very forthcoming with regard to freedom after the war. And people in Canada had had a very good record with regard to the Underground Railroad in its early stages. Many, many people of African ancestry went over to the British side. But in Plymouth, Massachusetts, there were 4 men who identified with the ideals of the revolutionary struggle toward a Republican democracy, and for better or worse, invested and tossed their fate in that regard, in that direction. And they are buried at the Partingways Cemetery. And I just think that it's appropriate, before I read the poem that I wrote in the bicentennial year of 1976, to commend the shepherding of the Partingways Project by the pioneering Marge Anderson, and the foresight, the commitment, and the dedication of Eddie Johnson, who has understood that that site and those bones are a core of a model history of an ongoing contribution by a people who have been, in many ways, the Americans, the keepers of the promise of the ideals, beginning in those graves. And I think that before we go any further, we should commend Eddie Johnson for being so determined. You know, that's not all he does. You know, that 6-hour gospel program that he does is an institution. Eddie's an institution builder. You know, you judge people by what they do. And that is the beginning of something very, very important. I'm very happy to be party to this program. Now, if I can see the poem, I will share it with you. I visited the site in Plymouth, the grave of these 4 black revolutionary soldiers. And this is not a rousing poem. It is a meditative piece of reflection on history. Notes and thoughts at Partingways Cemetery. The sign reads, Partingways Cemetery. Here lie the graves of 4 Negro slaves, Kwame, Prince, Plato, Cato. These men fought in the Revolutionary War and were freed at its close. The cemetery is located in the original 94-acre lot deeded to them by the government when they were given their freedom. Manumission. Death, the great emancipator. The wind and rain are part of a wreath of wildflowers and weeds and blackberry vines, remnants of an ancient dwelling's foundation, half a field away. An archaeological dig, strings, stakes, excavates the old colony of New Guinea. They are always trying to dig us, always trying to dig either our essence or our graves. Black-eyed Susans holding Queen Anne's lace, mauve blossoms I do not know, blood and blues make purple. Weathered gray granite, 5 grassless graves, blight, rust, bracket fungi on hickory, oak, maple, sycamore, conifers, sumacs, poison ivy, and many, many vines. A twin-trunked oak sucks, seeks downward. Roots. The vines are potted in 5 skulls, think blackberries. To eat one is to chew on a dream, to swallow the sweet thought of hope. The berries are succulent ball shot, pigmented hopes, tears from the underground, ball bearings from a subway train. Kwame, Prince, Plato, Cato Howe, Jefferson, Washington, Franklin. The premier founding fathers in the American pantheon. 2 slaveholders and an inventive lecher from places named after virginity and brotherly love. They tell us, oh, do not as I do as I say do. Franklin belly flopped his way through France after the womb-shaped sound of Philadelphia was cracked by hypocrisy, the told alloy of our metal. Kwame, Prince, Plato, Cato. So you fought. We be fighters. Did you ever see Plymouth Rock? It boogies now from the death rattle. I tremble when I remember God. Plymouth Rock, America's specious touchstone. The footsteps turn to gold. The yellow brick Catholic school down the road and around the corner was also founded on rock. And Pocahontas, Malinche, Mamiti,